So what are we currently up against? Wildfires are a natural disaster that are going to affect a big portion of the United States, but and it's going to affect mainly a large population in the western United States. And in this area, there's a lot of forests that could potentially burn down and affect close to almost 60,000 or 60 million people. So the wildfires could be worsened by unprecedented drought conditions. This is a map of the western United States that show potential drought areas, and as you can see, most of it is in dark red, which indicates extreme drought or exceptional drought.
Yeah, as we can see here in this the seasonal drought outlook for the next few months here, it's looking bad. I'm sure you guys have seen this before. I think the drought group covered that pretty well. It's going to get dry, which means that stuff is going to burn. Again, here's the projection for about 15 to 20 years from now. Red is dry, and purple is wet, and there's not a lot of wet, if you can see that on the map here. So it's about to be dry, especially in the United States, and again, that means stuff is going to burn.
So record low snow projections are also a huge contributing factor of wildfires that go hand in hand with drought. So low snowpack and early melting periods both really affect wildfire susceptibility. Low snowpack means that less water will be available in the ground and in streams for the hotter months, and then an earlier melting period causes like forests to be drier for a greater portion of the year without this snow. So here's some figures representing like the snowpack as of 2015 in April. The red is just like an alarming low percentage of the average within 1981 to 2010. As you can see, like a lot of that red is just within the West Coast, and the green to blue is supposed to be like that normal amount, the like 100%. It is like right at the average, and you can like hardly see that, especially over on the West Coast.
So what all this is doing is it's extending the actual time of the wildfire season. In the 70s, it was only about 5 months long. Now it is extended to over 7 months of time for wildfires. So the consequences of a big fire would be horrific. You would have joblessness from actual physical loss of jobs, opportunity loss from timber loss and other enterprises there. Insurance brokers would also take a huge hit, as there would be billions and billions of dollars in damage done with loss of homes, loss of property, etc.
Other areas of consequences can be seen with the loss of tourism in areas affected by wildfires. So like national parks, they actually like contribute a lot to our economic situation. And so according to like a 2013 National Park Service report, about $14.6 billion was in economic benefit is attributed to national parks. So this is a huge loss with areas really like affected by wildfire. Another area of concern is with the secondary disasters. Regions impacted by the wildfires have a greater susceptibility to landslides and flooding due to the damage to the soil and the vegetation that really like absorb the water. The Yellowstone Fire of 1988 is a devastating result of wildfires created by both human carelessness and lightning. Beginning in June, with severe drought conditions, fires burned clear into November, which caused for 25,000 firefighters to be brought in, and a total of 1.2 million acres were burned. This ended up costing $140 million at the time, which now would be about like $285 million. So it really costs a lot to have this much damage. The worst case scenario can be seen in California. Increased urbanization in like large cities such as Los Angeles and San Francisco. It really increases the amount of damage. Low snowfall and drought conditions leave like the regions very susceptible to burning and fire can spread very quickly up along the southern coast range, or multiple fires can spread down from the Sierra Nevadas.
Here's another case study that we looked at, is the 2010 Schultz Fire, which took place near Flagstaff, Arizona, but not in the actual city. So it was ignited by an abandoned campfire. Again, it burned adjacent to Flagstaff. Over 1,000 residents were evacuated, though no one died during the actual fire. But unfortunately, it was followed by the 4th wettest monsoon in Flagstaff history, and the resulting floods actually caused millions in property damage, and there was 1 death from the flooding, not the fire. And as you can see here in this table that we have, the response and mediation costs reached almost $60 million, which is a lot of money for just one fire that didn't even hit a city. So the citizens of Flagstaff, fresh off of this nice little natural disaster here, they passed the 2012 bond measure. The government sold $10 million in bonds, and it protected a little over 13,500 acres of national forest land and Flagstaff itself. This bond measure cost about $7,500, $740 per acre, which is like about that much. Contrast that to a little over $4,000 per acre, which is about that much, and that's a lot of savings if you think about being proactive as opposed to being reactive. And you can see in the graphs here, response and mediation costs estimated for something like that, and then there's 2 estimates right here about how much it would cost if a big fire would hit Flagstaff, and that's a conservative estimate and a not so conservative estimate. So it'll fall somewhere in between $6 million and $1.2 billion. The resources that Flagstaff and the surrounding area needed to recover, here's what they did to try to mitigate the damage after the fire happened. They applied straw mulch to the lower slopes of the high severity burn areas, so on hills and little mountains and stuff. That stabilized the slopes and prevented gullies from forming, which causes runoff and erosion. They also applied some wood straw to high severity burn slopes, which also mitigates the runoff of soil and sediment. And they removed culverts along the Schultz Pass Road to facilitate flood passage, so more floods wouldn't hit the city. And they also placed large rock riprap on targeted fill slopes, and that again helps mitigate the damage by the flood. But unfortunately, the effectiveness has been questionable. You can look at this picture here of the slopes in Arizona, and as you can see, there's still quite a bit of runoff because this mulch and straw that they apply, it's pretty susceptible to just being blown off by wind or rain or anything like that. So they had to reapply it in November 2010, but they've estimated that about 50% of that has just already gone away. And that estimate was done in 2011. So there's not, once this happens to a forest, there's not really much you can do other than to let kind of nature run its course of things, and that does take about 3 to 5 years, and that's, again, a conservative estimate. Here we have a nice little graph about how much the bond measure cost and how much the 2010 Schultz Fire remediation costs were. As you can see, the remediation costs were far higher than the bond measure costs. So think about if they had passed this bond measure in 2008, what they would be paying in 2010. Not that much.
So from 2004 to 2014, in a 10-year period, there have been more than 60,000 fires that burn annually, and they burn up more than 6 million acres each year. So fires aren't just a one-time occurrence, they occur annually. So any one of these fires could burn down cities and affect millions of acres of land on its own. So we have to think about preventing them instead of reacting to the aftermath of it. So typically, wildfires are a natural part of the environment as a regulatory system. Like some forests will burn down and it'll regrow, but because of overpopulation and potential burn areas, that throws the equilibrium of the environment off, which creates these huge hazards, which are why fires are burning bigger and longer. So a reaction to wildfires is to put them out and to evacuate people who are potentially close to the area. And a problem with reacting to this is that evacuation is costly it takes a lot of resources and people to try to figure out where to move these people and trying to predict where these wildfires would go. A lot of people also have ties to their homes and to the areas that they're living, so they might not want to evacuate, which would cause harmful situations to people, which is why it's important for us to try to figure out how to prevent these fires. If we could prevent them from happening, then we could prevent running into a situation where we have to evacuate people.
So what are we as a nation doing about it now? Currently we're spending about 250% more than we were in this decade than we have been in all the other decades. Current spending is at $3 billion per fire season. This graph over here shows how much we're spending to fight the fires versus how much we're spending to suppress it. And we're spending quite a bit more now to actually fight the fires than prevent them. So we have a two-tailed attack to how to prevent a mega fire from happening. The first is an automated terrestrial response unit. There are two types of this. There's a visual and a non-visual system. The visual system uses light to detect actual smoke that's happening. Right here is a picture of from a monitor station, and it has red boxes surrounding areas of smoke that are going off. There's also a non-visual system that looks for the actual physical fire. However, it is a little bit slower because it has to see the physical fire before it can actually detect anything. However, it can see through fog and smoke, which the other ones can't, so depending on the regional climate would depend on which one would be necessary. Each one of these monitors costs about $175,000 each, with a monitor station to send the signal elsewhere about $25,000. To cover the entire United States forests from Washington to Florida, not even just the West Coast, would cost around $1.8 billion, which, keep in mind, that sounds like a lot, but it's only 1/7 the cost of an aircraft carrier, so not too much.
It's a one-time payment also, not
Right.
a yearly fee.
And comparing that with what we're currently spending to fight fires, it still doesn't even break that amount, because we're, again, only spending $1.8 billion as opposed to the $3 billion that we spend. We could easily be mitigating that cost to fight fires. The other end of the response to fighting fires would be drones. Drones could be used. They could be an arm of the Air Force as a training unit. It could be used to attack these small fires before they become large. It would also be a good PR for the military. Drones give pretty bad PR. And it would also use the military budget, which is $619 billion annually, which is a lot more than most resources get. But that's not to take away from the methods that we currently use, which is forest cleanup and controlled burns. Both of these help keep the forest healthy and are necessary to put nutrients back into the forest. So with these, the new methods and the old methods, we could easily help mitigate the chances of a mega fire from happening.
So about 70 years ago now, the American government, in the form of the lovable Smokey the Bear, asked its citizens to help it prevent forest fires from happening. Now this committee, is asking you guys, the distinguished members of CSUC, to help us do that. We know you guys are tired. You've been hearing about this stuff all day. You're probably pretty brazen to all of these threats and things like that. But yeah, it's really important to help fight these fires, and it really will help the quality of life of the citizens of America.